She was chained in the dark, forgotten by most, but not by him. Owen kept quiet, kept to himself. But when he heard the cries behind the barn wall, something inside him broke. He couldn't walk away, not this time, not from her. The first time Owen heard the noise, he thought it was nothing, just the wind against the boards or some animal caught in the thorns again. The ranch had a way of swallowing up sound, making everything feel farther than it was. But the noise came again, softer this time, almost human. A breath too quick, a sob too broken. It was early still, sun barely up over the scrub hills behind the stables, and most hands were still inside scarfing down black coffee and half-burnt eggs. Owen Riley didn't say a word. He just slipped out the back of the bunkhouse and followed the sound toward the old feed barn. It was padlocked. That wasn't unusual. Mr. Garrison kept half the buildings locked unless he was in them himself. What was unusual was the way the dirt near the side window was disturbed, like someone had clawed at it. Owen crouched low. His hands were rough from work but steady as always, and he lifted the corner of the warped wood siding where the slats had come loose during last storm season. He didn't expect to see anyone. Not really. Just wanted to be sure. But then she moved. She was curled beneath a hanging sheet of canvas, her wrists bound in rusted shackles nailed into the barn floor. Her face was turned away from the shaft of light, too gaunt, too pale. She flinched at the creak of the wood like she was expecting someone else, like she'd learned to fear the sound of footsteps. Owen didn't speak. His throat had gone dry and tight, and besides, he wouldn't have known what to say. He let the siding fall back into place and stepped away, nearly stumbling into a rake left against the wall. His chest burned. His hands shook. Her name, he didn't even know her name. He kept quiet all morning, just like he always had. No one noticed, no one ever did. Owen was the kind of man people forgot was in the room until he was walking out. He worked harder than most, spoke less than any, and never caused a stir. That was how you survived Garrison's ranch. You kept your eyes low and your mouth shut. But that girl in the barn, the shackles. The way she hadn't made a sound when she looked up at him, just looked, like all the hope she'd once had dried up and left her hollow. That stayed with him, all through the fence mending, the calf feeding, the late-day branding. Her eyes like cracked glass barely holding together. He couldn't ask, not without making noise, not without putting a target on his back. And Garrison, he was the kind of man who smiled when he lied and made sure you felt the blade even when he pretended he wasn't holding one. But late that night, when the others were half-drunk on stolen whiskey and too loud to notice, Owen slipped out again. This time with a crowbar, a flask of water, and the ragged quilt he kept folded in his trunk. She didn't cry when he opened the side slats again. She didn't beg. She just watched him, that same glassy stare, too tired to hope and too broken to fear. He passed the water through first. She drank slowly, trembling. Then he pulled back the rotting floorboard near the side wall where the rusted spike was hammered deep. It took him 15 minutes and all his strength to pry it free without snapping it. She didn't speak the whole time. Just sat there, silent, as the chain slackened and fell from her wrist like a dead snake. "I'm Owen," he said finally, his voice hoarse from disuse. She didn't answer, didn't give a name, just stared at the space where the chain had been like she didn't believe it was real. He helped her crawl out the side, bundled her in the quilt, and led her behind the tool shed. His hands shook with every step. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something like rage, hot and quiet and trembling under the skin. He didn't know who she was or why she'd been there, but he knew no one deserved that. They stayed hidden until dawn. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. The next morning, Owen acted normal. Fed the chickens, mucked the stalls, same as always. The girl stayed hidden in the hayloft, tucked beneath the quilts and a spare tarp. He brought her scraps when he could, biscuits from his plate, a bit of jerky, more water. Still, she didn't speak. She looked stronger, though, a little less like someone who'd stopped believing in the sun. It was the third night when she finally said something. "My name's Cora," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rustle of hay. Owen turned slowly. He didn't ask the questions burning inside him. Why she was here, who'd put her there, Why Garrison? No, he didn't want to know yet. He just nodded. All right. Her eyes flicked toward him. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 19, maybe 20. Still too young to look that broken. Why are you helping me? She asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared out the slats toward the distant hills. Because I was you once, he said at last, and someone helped me. Cora didn't ask more, but the way her hand curled into the blanket, the way her shoulders eased just slightly, it was enough. But peace didn't last. 2 days later, a man came to the ranch. Not a buyer, not a drifter. A man in a military coat with polished boots and a leather satchel. He had papers, questions. Said he was looking for a girl, runaway, maybe kidnapped. Said her name was Cora Lively. Said there was a reward. Owen felt the breath go out of him. Mr. Garrison smiled too easily, told the man he hadn't seen anything. No strange girls, no trouble here. But Owen saw the way Garrison's hand curled tight behind his back, the way his eyes flicked just once toward the far barn, not the one Cora had been held in, but close, too close. That night Owen moved her again, deeper into the pasture, into the crumbling root cellar beneath the east ridge. No one used it anymore. No one even remembered it was there. She didn't complain. She just followed him, weak and silent, her thin boots crunching softly against the frost-hardened ground. And when they got there and he lit the single oil lamp, she turned to him and said, "He said he'd kill me if I ran." Owen froze. Cora sank to the ground, her eyes rimmed red but dry. I believed him. He sat beside her, didn't touch her, just let her speak. He wasn't supposed to take me here, just to stop, he said, but he locked the door, left me there. I thought it was over when you opened that slat. Owen stared at the flickering flame. You saved me, she whispered, but I don't think I'm safe. He looked up then, and what Cora saw in his eyes wasn't just determination, it was something colder, sharper. You're not, he said, not yet. And far above them, back at the ranch house, Mr. Garrison was on the porch smoking a cigar, watching the trailhead with narrowed eyes. He'd lied to the man with the papers, but not because he was hiding Cora. Because he was waiting for someone worse. Cora thought she'd escaped, but Garrison never let go of what he believed he owned. And Owen, he'd lit a fire that couldn't be put out, not without someone getting burned. The night air in the cellar turned heavy, laced with damp earth and the slow drip of meltwater from the spring thaw. Cora lay awake, curled against the rough stone wall, her eyes locked on the dim glow of the lantern Owen had left burning low. Every creak of the old boards overhead made her flinch. Every gust of wind sounded like a man's footsteps. She wanted to believe she was safe now, tucked far beyond the reach of Garrison's cruelty, but belief was a luxury she'd learned to live without. Owen had given her something rarer than hope. He'd given her time, time to breathe, time to stop flinching every time a shadow moved, but even that wouldn't last. Above them the ranch was changing. The man with the papers hadn't come back, but his visit had stirred something. Garrison rode the fence lines twice that week. He posted 2 new hands at the barn entrances, men Owen had never seen before, rough around the edges and all too eager to follow orders. And there were whispers now, even among the old hands, about a girl, about trouble coming down from the north. Owen kept his head down, he always had, but he watched, listened. And one night, 2 days after he'd moved Cora to the cellar, he saw Garrison standing by the far paddock, talking to a man dressed in city black, a telegram crumpled in one gloved hand. He didn't need to hear the words. The tension in Garrison's jaw said enough. The problem hadn't gone away. It was growing teeth. That night Owen brought Cora a coat. It was too big for her, wool and canvas with a missing button, but she pulled it around her shoulders like armor. How much longer? She asked, not looking up. Few days, Owen said. Week maybe. To what? He paused. To getting you out. Cora didn't answer, but she folded the coat tighter, like she wanted to believe that too. The plan wasn't much of one. Owen didn't have money, didn't have a horse of his own. The trail east was watched, the ridge west worse. But he knew the land. And he knew that if they cut through dry brush hollow just before dawn, they might slip past the new guards without being noticed. If the snow didn't fall again. If the river hadn't risen. If no one caught on. Too many ifs, but Owen was used to that. He worked harder that week, trying to keep suspicion off his back. He stayed late mending fence posts, hauling feed, keeping his head down. But still, Garrison watched him, not directly, not enough to call it out. But Owen felt it, in the pauses between commands, in the way Garrison asked how he was sleeping, in the way he lingered too long by the barns. And then came the night Owen came back to the cellar and found the lantern moved 3 inches from where he'd left it. Cora was fine, shaken but unharmed. "I heard someone," she whispered. "Thought it was you." Owen didn't answer. He lit the lantern again and stared at the shadows stretching across the cellar walls. If someone had found her, they hadn't taken her. Not yet, but the message was clear. They were running out of time. The next day he asked Nate, the oldest ranch hand, weathered and slow-moving, about Garrison's past. Just casual, just talk. But Nate didn't laugh it off. His mouth tightened and he looked around before leaning in. "Man's got land in his blood and poison in his teeth," he muttered. "Wouldn't cross him unless you don't care about walking." Owen didn't say anything, but that night he didn't sleep. Cora had started talking more, short phrases at first, then longer, softer ones. She asked about the ranch, about Owen's childhood, about how long he'd been here. He kept his answers clipped. She didn't push. But one night, curled beneath the quilts, she said, "I was supposed to marry him." Owen turned toward her. "Garrison." "No," she said, voice flat. "His nephew didn't matter, though. He took what he wanted, said it was for the family." Owen didn't respond. The silence stretched long, broken only by the wind above and the low drip of water from the rocks. "I said no," she whispered. "He locked me in anyway." She didn't cry. She just folded her arms across her knees and stared at the dirt like she could bury the memory under enough silence. Owen didn't touch her, didn't offer comfort. He knew better than to pretend words could fix something like that. But he stayed there, and when she finally laid down, she did so a little closer than before. The plan came together faster than he wanted. A break in the patrol. A wagon scheduled for repairs near the southern ravine. He could take the draft horse, slow but strong. He'd ride behind it, guiding Cora from the cellar to the creek bed under cover of night. If they were lucky, they'd hit the supply route near Whitlow's Ridge before noon. After that, it was dust and desert, but at least it was Garrison's land. But the night before they were to leave, Owen returned to the cellar and found it empty. The quilts were gone, so was the lantern. At first he thought she'd run. But then he saw the boot prints, 2 sets, one smaller, the other heavy and wide, and a trail of blood leading away from the back entrance. He followed them, past the ridge down into the hollow, through bramble and frost. And then he saw her. Cora chained again, but this time outside to a rusted post meant for tethering wild horses. Her face was cut, her lips split, but her eyes, those eyes burned. Garrison stood beside her, holding the crowbar Owen had once used to set her free. "You think I didn't know," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "You think I didn't see you sniffing around my property?" Owen said nothing. "You think you get to take what's mine?" Garrison's tone sharpened. "You think she wants your help?" Cora flinched as he grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him. "Tell him," Garrison said. "Tell him what happens when people don't follow the rules." Owen's hand drifted toward the knife on his belt, not for Garrison, but for the chain. Garrison saw it, smiled. "You want to make a choice, Riley," he said softly. "Go ahead, make it, but once it's made, there's no going back." Owen met Cora's eyes. She didn't speak, she didn't beg. But he saw it in her. The fire, the need. The choice made itself. Owen didn't remember drawing the knife, only that it was in his hand and the cold bit into his knuckles. He moved slow, calculated, his boots sinking in the frozen mud with each step. Garrison didn't move, didn't even blink. He stood beside Cora like he owned the world, as if the earth itself bent at his whim. The wind howled through the hollow, rattling the dead branches above, but Owen didn't hear it. All he heard was the hitch in Cora's breath and the creak of iron against her wrist as she tried and failed to pull away. "No going back," Garrison said again, almost kindly, as if offering advice to a favored son. Owen took one more step, then dropped the knife. It hit the dirt with a dull thunk. For the first time, Garrison looked surprised. Owen's voice came low, steady. "You want me, not her." Garrison tilted his head. "Do I? You want to make an example. It's always about control. You don't care who you break, long as someone's watching." Garrison's smile returned, slow and poisonous. "Smart boy." Owen raised both hands, slow. "Let her go. Do what you want with me." Cora twisted then, eyes wide. "No," she whispered. "No, don't." "Quiet," Garrison snapped, his hand jerking toward her so fast she flinched again. Owen didn't move. He kept his hands up. "You'll get more out of hurting me than a girl already broken." That landed. Garrison's smile deepened, and for a moment Owen thought it was going to work. He'd struck the right note, played to the man's pride. But then Garrison's gaze shifted and something darker passed through his eyes. "She's not broken," he said softly. "Not yet." Then he turned and slammed the crowbar into the post beside her with a crash that echoed through the hollow like a gunshot. Birds lifted from the trees. The chain snapped free of the base, but Garrison didn't remove it from her wrist. He yanked it instead, forcing Cora to stumble toward him. She didn't scream, just gasped, sharp and ragged, her knees buckling from the jolt. Owen lunged. Garrison spun, swinging the crowbar, but Owen ducked low, grabbed the dropped knife, and tackled him to the ground. The blade never touched flesh. He wasn't fast enough, or maybe he hesitated. Garrison rolled them, his knee slamming into Owen's ribs, and the knife skittered out of reach. Cora scrambled back, blood running down her arm from the shackle digging deeper with every movement. She grabbed a rock, anything, and tried to strike Garrison's shoulder. It barely staggered him, but it was enough. Owen struck then, not with the blade but with his fist, hard, once, twice, until Garrison's grip slipped and he fell back with a snarl. Owen didn't waste time. He grabbed the chain, hauled Cora up, and ran. They didn't speak. The world became motion, branches slashing, breath burning in their lungs, boots pounding over packed snow. The chain dragged behind her, sparking once when it struck a hidden rock, but neither of them stopped. Not until they reached the ridge above the ravine, and even then, Owen didn't stop moving. He turned west, toward the canyon, toward the place no man with sense dared cross this time of year. "Where are we going?" Cora gasped, stumbling beside him. "Off his land," Owen panted. "Far enough he can't chase us without someone noticing." "He will," she said, voice thin. "I know." They reached the ravine just before dawn. Mist clung to the rocks, thick and cold, swallowing their boots with every step. There was no bridge, just a fallen pine, long since split down the middle by rot. Owen tested it. It groaned under his weight, but held. "You go first," he said. Cora hesitated. Her hands bled. Her coat was torn, and the chain still dangled from her wrist like a curse. But she nodded and stepped forward, arms out for balance. Halfway across, the wood shifted. Owen reached out, panic surging, but she steadied. She made it. He followed fast, each step a prayer. They hit the far side and didn't stop. Behind them, Garrison's men were already following the trail. Owen led her into the gorge, through icy water and over jagged stone. By midday, they found a cave, a narrow crack in the cliffside just wide enough for the two of them to squeeze inside. He tied the chain around a rock, not to trap her, but to keep it from making noise. She collapsed against the wall, breath ragged, eyes dark. "You all right?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I'm here." He lit a fire with flint and luck, and they huddled together in the half-light. It was the first time he saw her smile, crooked and faint. "You really were going to let him take you," she said after a while. "I had to try something." "You're quiet," she said. "People don't usually do things like that unless they're running from something." He didn't answer. "I killed a man," she whispered. Owen looked over. She met his eyes. Not Garrison, before him, a man who wouldn't take no. "I thought if I said sorry enough, someone would forgive me." "I'm not here for your sins," Owen said, "only your future." She swallowed hard. They rested, but only for a few hours. By dusk, they had to move again. Garrison wouldn't stop. Owen knew it now. It wasn't just about pride, it was about control, and men like him didn't give up what they thought they owned. They traveled by night, following game trails and riverbeds. Owen caught a rabbit with a snare and made stew from creek water and wild onions. Cora ate in silence, her gaze never straying far from the shadows. On the fourth day, they reached a mining town, Silvercut. It wasn't much. A few buildings, a saloon, a trading post, and a sheriff who looked like he'd rather sleep than solve problems. Owen didn't trust it. But they needed rest. They found a room above the stable, paid in coin Owen had hidden years ago in the heel of his boot. Cora washed, slept. She cried once, silent and shaking beneath the quilt, but didn't explain. She didn't have to. The next morning, Owen woke to find her gone. Panic rose, sharp and bitter. He tore through the town, checked every alley, every doorway. And then he found her, standing in front of the telegraph office, her hands trembling. "I sent word," she said, voice soft, "to my sister in Dakota Territory. She thought I was dead." Owen exhaled slowly. "She's coming," Cora added, "says she'll take me home." For a long time, Owen didn't speak. She looked at him. "You're not coming, are you?" He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything," she said. He stepped forward, gently reached for her hand, the one that still bore the faint scar of the shackle. "Neither do you." They didn't say goodbye. He gave her the last of his money, showed her how to carry the knife without drawing attention, told her which trail to avoid. She hugged him once, tight and sudden. He didn't move. But when she let go, there was something behind his eyes, something bright, something breaking. He watched her ride away the next morning on a borrowed mare, coat flapping behind her like wings. He didn't go back to Garrison's ranch. He didn't go anywhere, not for a long while. But 3 weeks later, a rider came through Silvercut with a message. No name on the paper, just a note. "Safe free because of you." And beneath it, a pressed wildflower. Bloodroot. Owen stared at it for a long time, then folded the paper and put it in his coat pocket, next to the knife he'd never drawn, and the chain link he'd pried from the barn floor. It had been nearly 2 months since Cora disappeared down the westbound trail, and Owen watched her vanish into dust and distance. Since then, he hadn't spoken more than a few dozen words to anyone. He'd left Silvercut by the back road, skirted the basin, and gone quiet into the high hills. Work was easy enough to find if you didn't ask for much. He fixed fence lines for a widow outside Tallow Creek, cleaned out irrigation ditches for a foreman who never bothered to learn his name, and once spent 4 days in silence hauling buckets for a dying man whose well had gone sour. It wasn't peace, not really, but it was enough distance to keep him from thinking about the ranch, about Garrison, about what might be waiting if he ever stepped back into the valleys he used to know. But distance only lasts so long. He first heard the name in a saloon near Ox Hollow, 3 miners talking low at a corner table while rain hit the roof like bullets. They didn't see him sitting in the dark, nursing coffee instead of whiskey. Didn't realize the man they were speaking about used to work with Garrison. All they knew was the gossip. Someone had burned down one of the Garrison barns. Someone had left a man tied to a post with both knees broken and a note pinned to his chest. "You want to own something. Start with your own soul." The sheriff had no suspects. The The land was too wide, witnesses too few, but Garrison had his own kind of law, and he was hunting. Owen finished his coffee and left before they noticed. That night sleep didn't come. The next morning he rode back east. He told himself it was just curiosity, a need to know what had happened, who'd been hurt, whether it was just some drifter or a hand who'd had enough. But deep down, Owen knew better. Garrison had made a move, had reminded the land that he still held the reins, and men like him didn't let go of grudges, which meant it wasn't over. Not for Cora, not for anyone who'd helped her. He arrived at the edge of Garrison's property by the third day. The trees were thinner here, the air heavy with late spring rot. He didn't ride in, he just watched. The fences looked the same, the bunkhouse still leaned to one side, and the big house sat on the rise like a king on his throne. But something had shifted. He saw it in the way the hands moved, hurried, heads low, too quick to glance over their shoulders. Garrison had always ruled with fear, but this was different. This was panic. He waited until dusk, then slipped through the tree line and walked the dry riverbed toward the barn. It was the one they'd kept her in, that first barn, the one with the warped siding and the window with the loose slats. It was still standing, but barely. Smoke-stained, blackened, part of the roof gone. Someone had set fire to it from the inside. Owen stared at the scorched earth, his boots crunching over charcoal and ash. He didn't understand it, not fully. Why now? Why return? Then he saw the mark carved into the old feed trough, a flower. Bloodroot. His chest tightened. Cora. She had come back. And suddenly everything made sense in a way that terrified him. She hadn't run. Not truly. She'd gone to heal, to rest, and now she was doing what he hadn't dared. She was fighting back. And she'd started with the place that nearly killed her. Owen turned back toward the tree line, just in time to see the silhouette on the ridge. Garrison. Not alone. Two men flanked him, the same ones Owen had seen months ago, hired hands with hard eyes and new rifles. But it was the man in the center who made his blood go cold. Younger, sharper, a stranger with a deputy's star that gleamed even in the low light. They'd brought the law now. Or something that looked like it. Owen ducked low and retreated into the woods, his thoughts moving faster than his feet. If Garrison had federal eyes on him, Cora wasn't safe. Not if they pinned the fire on her. Not if they convinced a court that she'd trespassed, stolen, threatened. And Owen knew they'd try. Garrison would twist the truth into knots if it meant revenge. He had to find her first. But where? She mentioned Dakota, a sister. It wasn't much to go on. Still, he rode north, stopping in every town with a telegraph wire and watching for anything. A notice, a mention, a whisper of a girl named Cora with fire in her blood and scars on her wrists. In Wind Creek he got lucky. A midwife remembered a young woman with a limp and a quiet way of staring through people. Said she stayed a few nights above the smithy and bought paper and ink. Said she had letters to write. She left a few days later, headed toward the Ridge Rock Pass. It was enough. Owen followed. The land stretched wide again, plains giving way to shale and shale to scrub, and finally to red stone that bled heat even after sunset. He tracked her for days, slowly stitching a trail from dust and rumor. A preacher said she gave his wife a necklace before boarding a stage. A stable boy swore she left with a saddle that didn't belong to her. A widow claimed she cried in her parlor and left behind a half-read Bible. But none of them said she seemed scared. Just determined. He found her on the 6th day, walking the high road above Cinder Flats, cloak pulled tight against the wind. She was thinner, harder, but it was her. He didn't call her name, just stepped into the path ahead of her and waited. She froze when she saw him, then her eyes filled, but she didn't run, didn't move at all. "You came back," he said softly. "I had to. They're looking for you." "I know." He nodded once. "You left a mark." "I meant to." They stood there for a long moment, the wind tugging at her coat, the silence between them deeper than any words could reach. Finally she said, "I don't want to run anymore." "Then don't. They'll come. Let them." She stared at him, disbelief mixing with something deeper, recognition. "You'd stand with me, even now." Owen didn't smile, especially now. She exhaled slowly, like letting go of something she'd carried too long. Then she stepped toward him and took his hand. They found shelter that night in a canyon cave, lit a fire and sat close, warmth blooming in the stone. She told him what she'd done, how she'd waited, watched, learned the patterns of Garrison's men, how she slipped back, set the fire, and carved the symbol where only he would find it. "I didn't know if you were alive," she said. "I was," Owen replied, "but I wasn't living." Cora leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice barely audible above the flames. "I can't stop." "You don't have to." "I'm scared." "So am I." They stayed that way until sleep took them. In the morning they began to plan, not for escape but for confrontation. Owen had contacts, people who owed him favors, men who hated Garrison enough to listen. And Cora had stories, names, dates, details that could drag the man into a courtroom if they found the right ears. But justice in the West was a thin thread. And Garrison wasn't going to wait quietly. 2 days later, a bullet shattered the rock beside Owen's head while he was fetching water. Cora screamed. He hit the ground, rolled, came up behind a boulder. The shot came from the ridge. They were found. He grabbed her hand, pulled her into the ravine, and they ran. Rocks fell around them. Another shot missed. The third one didn't. It hit Owen in the shoulder, spun him halfway around. He fell hard but kept hold of her hand. "Leave me," he gasped. "No. You'll die. So will you if I do." They found cover under a ledge, and Cora pressed her hands hard to his wound. "Don't you dare die," she whispered. Owen smiled, teeth red with blood, not planning on it. Owen faded in and out, darkness coming in slow, cold waves that pulled at his edges like the tide. He wasn't sure how much blood he'd lost, only that the ground beneath him felt warm now, and that wasn't right. The West didn't offer warmth. Not out here. Not unless it meant to burn you or bury you. But every time he drifted too far into the quiet, Cora's voice dragged him back. Sometimes sharp, sometimes soft, always shaking. "Stay with me, Owen. Just a little longer, stay." He wanted to tell her he was trying, he was, but speech took more effort than breath, and breath was already hard enough. When he opened his eyes again, there was only the rock ceiling of the small cave they'd found, a slit between boulders hidden beneath the ridge. A place just deep enough to escape a rifle scope and just dark enough to be forgotten. She had dragged him here. Him half-conscious, bloodied, heavy as sin, and somehow she dragged him here. That alone should have killed her, but it hadn't. He blinked again, and this time her face was there. "Cora." Her hair was a mess of dust and sweat, her eyes hollowed out with fear and exhaustion. Her hands trembled as she pressed a damp cloth to his shoulder, soaked in creek water and some bitter-smelling herb. She didn't speak this time, just worked. "Still here," he whispered, voice ragged. Her eyes snapped to his. "You're awake." "Sort of." She exhaled, then leaned back on her heels, pressing her fingers to her lips like she couldn't decide whether to cry or curse. "You scared me." "Me too." She huffed something like a laugh, then looked down at his shoulder. "Bullet passed clean through, I think." "You think?" "I'm not a doctor, Owen." "You're doing fine." Her hands stilled, she stared at him. "You need real help." "We'll get it." "When?" "Soon." Cora shook her head. "They're still out there. I saw one of them this morning just past the ridge. He's circling slow, waiting for us to move." Owen tried to sit up and failed. Pain shot through him like lightning, and for a second the world went white. When he came back, he found her hand on his chest. "Don't," she said. I'm no good to you lying here. You're no good to me dead. He closed his eyes again, breathing through clenched teeth. I've been thinking, she said after a moment, about what comes next. Running. No. That made him open his eyes. Then what? We stop him. Garrison. All of them, the men he sends, the ones who look the other way, the ones who get paid to stay silent. Owen didn't respond. He watched her instead, how her shoulders squared even as she trembled, how her eyes, though tired, burned like embers. You think we can? He asked finally. No, she said, but I think we have to try. He nodded once. That was enough. The next day she set out alone. He protested, but she didn't waver. I need to draw them away. You can't move fast enough yet. If they think I'm running solo, they'll follow me. And if they catch you? They won't. Cora. I've run before, she said, voice steel. I've hidden. I've played small. That's how I survived. But I'm not just trying to survive anymore, Owen. He wanted to stop her, wanted to beg her to wait, to think. But there was no softness in her face now, no hesitation, just resolve. She left before sunrise. And sure enough, by midday, the first signs appeared, hoofprints too fresh to be old, shadows where none should be, the faint echo of voices across stone. She'd done it. She pulled them after her. Owen waited until dusk, then he stood. The pain nearly buckled him. The wound burned with each movement, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through it. He packed what little they had, water, bread, the knife, and the last of the herbs. Then he slipped from the cave and headed south, not toward escape, but toward help. He walked all night, following the stars and the memory of old trails. By morning, he reached the cabin of a man named Eli Waters, a trapper and recluse who owed Owen his life. Years ago, Owen had pulled him from a river swollen with meltwater, saved him from drowning. Eli had never forgotten. He opened the door with a grunt, took one look at Owen and stepped aside. You look like hell. Been worse. You bringing trouble. Always. Eli fed him, cleaned the wound properly and gave him a fresh coat. You're running from Garrison. Not running anymore. Then you're gonna need more than grit. Got anything else? Eli opened a chest and pulled out a rifle. A few things. That night, Owen wrote a letter. It was short, clear, direct. He signed it with a name he hadn't used in years, his full name. Owen Riley, former deputy of 3 counties, one-time bounty hand and witness to more crimes than any court had ever prosecuted. He knew the system, knew how to twist it back when it bent too far. He sent the letter east, to the federal marshal's office in Fort Braxton. Then he waited. 3 days passed. And then she came back. Cora staggered into Eli's yard at dusk, face sunburned, coat torn, lips cracked, but alive. She collapsed into Owen's arms, laughing and crying all at once. He held her, barely breathing. You came back, he whispered. I said I would. He helped her inside, fed her, let her sleep. When she woke the next morning, she told him everything. I led them all the way past Slate Hill, into the dry riverbed near Deacon's Hollow. They follow. Too many to count, but I doubled back, took the goat trail, lost them near Widow's Bluff. He shook his head in disbelief. You could have been killed. So could you. They sat in silence for a while, both of them staring out at the empty plain beyond Eli's cabin. Then Owen said, they're going to come back, and next time they'll be smarter. I know. I wrote to the marshals. She looked at him sharply. Will they come? If they think there's enough to charge him. And is there? There's enough to bury him. But that was the easy part. The hard part would be making sure she survived long enough to testify. They packed that day. loaded Eli's spare wagon, buried the rifle beneath sacks of flour, and set off east under cover of night. They kept off the main roads, stuck to arroyos and game trails, slept under brush and moved before sunrise. And on the sixth day, just before dawn, they saw it, Fort Braxton. A smudge of smoke and stone on the horizon, low walls and tall flags, and most importantly, the seal of law. But between them and it, at the bottom of the last valley, waited 3 riders. One of them was Garrison. He sat astride a black horse, coat flapping in the wind, eyes sharp as razors. He didn't raise a gun, didn't move at all, just waited. Cora's breath caught. "We can't turn back," she said. "No," Owen agreed, "we go through." He handed her the rifle. "I've never fired one," she whispered. "Point and squeeze, you won't be alone." They rode slow, deliberate, wagon creaking beneath them. Garrison didn't move. Not until they were 50 yards away. Then he stepped down from the saddle, walked into the center of the trail, and raised one hand. "Stop right there," he called. Cora didn't stop. Neither did Owen. They kept riding, the wagon groaning, the horses nervous. "I said stop." Still they rode. And behind them, down the trail, a new sound echoed. Hoofbeats. Many. Then uniforms. The marshals arrived in a dust storm of law and fury, their leader shouting orders before his boots hit the dirt. Garrison reached for his weapon. Owen was faster. He didn't shoot to kill, just to stop. The bullet hit Garrison in the thigh. He dropped screaming. The marshals swarmed. And just like that, it was over. Or so they thought. Because justice out here was only the beginning. The cell was too clean. That's what Cora noticed first. The air in Fort Braxton's holding wing didn't smell like dust or sweat or old blood. It smelled like stone soap and bureaucracy, like rules, like something that had tried to bury the wild but never fully could. Garrison sat on the cot with his hands bound in irons, his boots removed, his belt gone, and his mouth twitching like it hadn't yet accepted the loss. The cell door was thick oak reinforced with iron, a square cut into the upper third for communication. Cora stood beyond it, arms folded, Owen just behind her. The marshal had asked if she wanted to speak to him. He hadn't expected her to say yes. But she had. Now she stared at the man who'd chained her in a barn like an animal and tried to erase her name from the world. She waited for anger to rise, for fury or fear or something hot and righteous, but nothing came, just a strange, bone-deep stillness. Garrison spoke first. "They say I'll hang." Cora said nothing. "They say a lot of things." He leaned back against the wall, still trying to wear the smirk that once held half a county in line. "You really think they'll believe you over me? I built this land. Paid for the walls around your precious courthouse." "You also paid for silence," she said flatly, "with blood." He shrugged, the chains clinking. "And you think that fire makes you some kind of hero." "I didn't light it to be a hero. I lit it to be free." He studied her for a beat, then shifted forward slightly. "I know men like me always come back, one way or another. You think these marshals will watch you forever. You think you'll always have a man at your side with a gun." "I don't need a man at my side," Cora said, "but I've got one anyway, and I'm not hiding." She turned without waiting for another word. The marshal nodded once as she stepped into the hallway, and behind them, the door slammed shut with a finality that shook the floor. It had taken less than a week for the charges to stack high enough that Garrison's lawyers couldn't weasel him out of them. Between Cora's testimony, Owen's sworn statement, and the journal she'd kept, meticulously logging every day of her captivity, every name she'd heard whispered through barn walls, every time she'd watched a man turn his back, there was no more space for doubt. The federal courts had taken it seriously. Finally. Maybe it was the new judge in the circuit. Maybe it was just time. Owen had sat beside her for every hearing, never said much, just watched. But when she faltered, when the room grew too quiet after she spoke, or when Garrison's eyes landed on her like a weight, Owen's presence kept her steady. When she gripped the edge of her chair hard enough to leave half-moons in the wood, he laid his hand gently over hers, not pulling, just anchoring. They stayed in Braxton through it all. The town wasn't much, half brick, half ambition, but it was honest. The woman who ran the inn gave Cora a room with windows that opened wide and never once locked the doors. The blacksmith taught Ben, Eli's boy who followed them down from the ridge, how to use tools without smashing his thumbs. Owen spent most mornings at the livery, helping break horses and fix tack. The rhythm helped, kept his body moving and his mind from circling too long in the dark. One afternoon, weeks into the trial, Cora stood behind the general store, staring at a row of grapevines someone had planted years back. They were wild now, climbing in crooked arcs across the fence, their fruit still small and hard but persistent. She reached out and touched one gently, then turned as Owen approached. "I don't know what happens after," she said. "After the trial. After all of it." Owen nodded slowly. "That's the trouble with survival. It doesn't come with instructions." She smiled faintly. "Think the land remembers." He tilted his head. "Places like Silvercut, Bitter Hollow, that barn. Think the earth knows what was done there." Owen followed her gaze toward the horizon. "Maybe, but maybe it's like us, trying to heal." A messenger arrived the next morning. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was full by the time Cora stepped in. Locals, marshals, reporters with thin mustaches and notepads they clutched like gospel. Garrison sat stoic, but his eyes flickered as she entered. Owen flanked her. No one questioned it. The judge's voice was calm, measured, almost bored as he read out the decision. "Guilty. On all counts." And just like that, it was over. No applause, no cheers, just silence. Then the judge continued. "Sentencing will follow next week. The prisoner is to be held under federal custody until such time." Cora barely heard the rest. Her ears rang. Her knees wanted to buckle, but she didn't let them. Instead, she turned toward the gallery and walked out into the morning light, blinking at how bright the world had suddenly become. That night the townsfolk held a gathering in the square. Not a celebration exactly. Just a meal, a fire, music drifting from a fiddle someone hadn't played in years. Cora sat beside the flames, wrapped in a wool coat borrowed from the marshal's wife. Owen stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning the faces not out of fear but habit. Eventually she joined him. "They want to know what we'll do now," she said. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. We could leave, head west, try that orchard town you mentioned." Cora thought about it. The idea of land that didn't know her name, of trees that bore fruit without pain. Maybe. Owen nodded. "Or maybe we stay here a while, help build something that lasts." He looked at her. "You're good with wood," she said. "You're better with people." He smiled then, just a little. "We'd need land. They're offering parcels for folks who help the case." "You'd take it." She nodded. "For the first time, I think I'd like to stay still." They did. The house they built wasn't big, but it stood solid. Oak beams, broad porch, a well that ran deep. Owen carved the window frames by hand and Cora planted wildflowers around the fence line. It took time, longer than either of them expected, but every nail, every stone felt like a step toward something new. The trial didn't erase the past, nothing could. But it changed the future. Letters arrived from other towns, women who'd heard her name and wanted to tell their stories. Some scarred, some still trapped, some just needing to say me too in a world that had never let them speak before. Cora read every one. Some she answered. Others she tucked away in a box beneath her bed, a reminder not of pain, but of how far she'd come. Owen never asked what was in them. He didn't have to. Sometimes, late at night, she'd wake from a dream still tangled in fear, her breath caught, her hands shaking. And every time, without fail, he'd be there, silent, steady, warm. "You're safe," he'd whisper, "I'm here." And she believed him, because he always was. And then, one night, just before the first frost, a letter arrived addressed to both of them. The marshal's seal on the envelope. Garrison was dead. Knifed in prison by another inmate, the details murky and the motive uncertain. Cora stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't cry, didn't smile, just folded it back into its envelope and set it aside. Owen found her on the porch hours later, staring at the stars. "Does it change anything?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just feels strange, like the air shifted." He sat beside her. "You okay?" "I don't know." He didn't press. They sat in silence, the night wrapping around them like a shroud, the wind cold and sharp but honest. A new season was coming. They could feel it. Spring did not arrive in a single moment. It crept instead, slow and unsure, like a wounded animal easing into the open after long months in the shadows. The frost thawed, but only a little each morning. The creek behind the house still carried slivers of ice well into April. And Cora, for all the warmth the world began to offer again, sometimes found herself standing in the field outside their cabin just to feel the wind, just to remind herself she wasn't in that barn anymore. That she wasn't shackled, that she could move, speak, breathe without permission. The land bloomed reluctantly. Wildflowers punched through stubborn earth in crooked patches. A pair of deer made their way down from the hills and began sleeping near the fence line. Owen planted beans and barley with Eli's help, tilling rows with the same methodical strength he used for everything else. When he worked, he barely spoke. But when Cora brought him water, he always looked up, always smiled in that quiet way of his, as if she was the thing in bloom he hadn't expected to survive the winter. They didn't speak much about the past anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because it had taken up enough space in their lives already. Until one evening in late May, when a rider came down the road from Braxton, dusty coat, hard eyes, letter in hand. Owen opened it while Cora watched from the porch. "What is it?" she asked, not moving from her seat. He scanned the letter twice before answering. "There's another trial, out in Wendover, one of Garrison's old partners. They want a witness." Cora didn't speak. "Doesn't have to be you," he added, folding the paper. "They've got others, but they're asking." She looked out at the field, at the line of trees beyond the ridge, dark and familiar. She thought about what it had cost her to speak last time, not just the words, but the silence that followed. The way people looked at her different. The way some townsfolk crossed the street when she passed, not out of hatred, just discomfort, like truth made them itch. "I'll go," she said after a long pause. Owen didn't try to talk her out of it. They packed light, just enough for a few days. Eli stayed behind to watch the place, Ben clinging to his leg like a shadow now, his laughter something so constant it filled the house like sunlight. Cora kissed the boy's head before she left and his arms squeezed her tight. "Come back soon," he said. She promised she would. The road to Wendover wasn't long, but it was rough, dust-choked and narrow, climbing through broken hills where old wagon ruts still clawed the dirt. They passed burned-out cabins and collapsed fences, signs of settlements that had tried and failed. But they also passed new ones, fresh timbers, smoke from new chimneys, children running barefoot in the dust. The West was full of both, beginnings and endings, often side by side. They reached town just past dusk. Wendover had a single main street, a crooked church, and a courthouse that leaned slightly westward like it was listening to something no one else could hear. The marshal's deputy met them at the livery, offered food and a room. No questions, no pity. The trial began the next morning. This time was different, not easier. Nothing about testifying was ever easy, but different. She knew who she was now. She didn't flinch when she said her name. She didn't pause when the defense lawyer tried to twist her words. and when she stepped down from the stand, she didn't feel like she was escaping. She felt like she was finishing something. Owen was waiting in the hallway. "How'd it go?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "I said what needed saying." He nodded. That was enough. They left Wendover the next day, just as a dry wind picked up from the south, hot and full of summer's coming bite. The air shimmered above the road as they rode. By mid-afternoon, the dust turned the horizon to haze, and somewhere just past Devil's Bend, they heard hoofbeats behind them. Not fast, but steady. Owen slowed the wagon. His hand went instinctively to the rifle tucked under the bench. "Could be nothing," Cora said. "Out here, nothing rides like that." They didn't look back at first, just listened. Then the voice rang out, "Owen Riley." It wasn't a threat, just a name, but it stopped them both. Owen pulled the reins. The wagon creaked to a halt. A single rider approached from the dust, tall, lean, hat pulled low. As he neared, Cora could see the badge glinting faintly against his coat. "Federal Marshal." He slowed, raised a hand in greeting. "Didn't mean to spook you." "You've got a habit of bad timing," Owen said. The marshal smiled. "Heard you were passing through, thought I might catch you." Cora narrowed her eyes. "Something wrong?" "Not wrong," the marshal said, "just unfinished." He dismounted, dusted himself off. "That man you helped put away in Braxton, the first one, Garrison, turns out he left more behind than land and bad debts. There's a property up north near the Dakotas, and something buried on it." "What kind of something?" Owen asked. The marshal hesitated. "Names, records, ledgers, blackmail, everything he never wanted seen." Cora's stomach turned. "We'll need someone who can verify what's there," the marshal continued. "Someone who knew how he worked, what he kept hidden." "You want her to go?" Owen asked. "I'm asking." Cora looked at the marshal, then at Owen, then at the road ahead. She thought of the life they'd started to build, the soil just now turning soft enough for roots, the flowers blooming wild along the fence, the boy waiting with his small hands and wide eyes. But she also thought of the names she'd read in her letters, the women who hadn't made it, the girls still trapped in barns with no windows. "I'll go," she said. Owen didn't argue. The marshal handed her a sealed letter. Instructions: meet us at the crossing near Lark Ridge in 5 days. He tipped his hat and rode off into the haze, a ghost with a badge. They were quiet on the ride home. At sunset, they stopped near a stream and unpacked supper: bread, dried meat, a handful of apples. Cora didn't eat much, just sat with her back against the wagon wheel, staring at the stars beginning to blink through the sky. Owen joined her. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No. But you're going anyway." She nodded. "If that barn had burned with me inside it, no one would have asked questions. That's the kind of silence he built. I can't let that stay buried." "You could stay." "I can't." He took her hand. "Then I'll ride with you." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know." She squeezed his fingers gently. "Thank you." They rode out 3 days later, north toward cold winds and deeper secrets, toward the last chapter in a story that had refused to stay buried. It wasn't revenge they were chasing, not even justice, just the truth, for the dead, for the living, for anyone who had once been silenced and never dared to speak again. And though the trail was rough and the night fell heavy, neither of them turned back. Because sometimes healing wasn't about staying still. Sometimes it was about walking straight into the dark and carrying the light with you. Even if your hand still shook. Even if your voice still trembled. Even if the world tried to break you all over again. You rode anyway. Together,